Hello, and welcome to the Campus Catalyst case competition tutorial video. Hopefully, you're here because you have a Campus Catalyst interview coming up, and you would like to know how we do our case interviews. Well, we're going to tell you. Observe your three contestants here who are all competing for a spot in the Campus Catalyst class and the undying glory of solving an imaginary nonprofit case.
Hi, I'm Brad, potential econ, stat, computer science, triple major.
Chad.
I'm Alex. I'm a second-year public policy major.
Welcome, applicants. Thank you so much for coming in. Our case today is going to have 4 stages. First, I'm going to give you the introduction to the case and give you a couple minutes to talk amongst yourselves, figure out what clarifying questions you'd like to ask and what data you'd like to request. Second, I'm going to give you those data and you're going to have a longer period, about 7 minutes, to talk about them, figure out what inferences you can draw, and at any point you can ask more clarifying questions. Then I'm going to say take a couple minutes to wrap up and formulate a final presentation. At that point, you'll gather your thoughts into something you're going to present. And finally, you'll give your final presentation. It should be about a couple minutes long, imagining that you're presenting to your client after an entire engagement length's worth of work. And that will wrap up the case. Here is the first stage of the case. I'm going to read the prompt. Your client is offering neighborhoods better after-school education, or On Base for short, a nonprofit that provides after-school education to elementary school students at sites around Chicago. On Base has seen rapid growth in the past 5 years, both in number of locations and students served. Much of their funding comes from grants from the federal government. However, their funding formula is about to change. Instead of receiving $2,000 per student, as they have in the past, they will receive $1,500 per student in 2020. You've been hired to answer the following key question. With our grant funding per student diminishing substantially, what solutions should we pursue to keep ourselves afloat? The client would also like to know, if we don't change anything about our operations, what will our finances look like in 2020? Now, you all can take a couple minutes to talk about the case, review the prompt, ask me any clarifying questions, because I have some information that might be relevant, and figure out what data you would like to request that might help with your analysis. Go ahead.
The first thing we need to know is who our competitors are. We need to know who this nonprofit is competing with so that we can make sure we steal as much of the market share as we possibly can.
That makes sense, but I think we could also focus on the nonprofit itself and maybe understand some of the financials and get some data on like how it's currently running. And then we can compare that to any competitors that they might have if we have information on that. What do you think, Chad?
Yeah, financials, I think, would be a good way to go right out of the gate. We need to find a way to recoup that $500 from the grant funding.
Do you have any information on their current financials?
Let's take a second to talk with our board and see what they think went well or poorly about those first 30 seconds there.
Well, Brad came in with a lot of confidence, but he wasn't taking any notes and he didn't seem interested in what his teammates had to say. Alex, on the other hand, did a great job of including Chad, and she had some great insights and is looking for the right data. However, Chad seemed very quiet and needed to be pushed by his teammates. I'd like to see more from Chad, piping up and sharing some of his opinions.
And now we move on to the data analysis phase. In the first phase, the candidates asked for financial data on the nonprofit, which I'm going to give them right now. They also asked for program data on how many students the nonprofit enrolls and what its operations look like. Off camera, they asked for a map of where the nonprofit operates, so I'm going to hand that over. And they also asked for some testimonials, reviews from people who have participated, so I'm going to hand them all those data right now as well. And let's see how our applicants handle the data delivery.
Would you mind moving that over a
Yeah.
little bit?
So Alex, I don't know if you know that, but so an expense is something that the nonprofit has to pay, whereas income is money coming in. I don't know if you know that, but Brad, what do you think of this data?
I think the finances look good. I like this testimonial. I told my teacher about On Base and she thought I was talking about baseball. I like that one.
Just looking at the financials, I think we can see that they're already operating at a pretty big loss. And it seems like they added 2 new locations in the last year, which contributed a lot to...
You're so right. It does look like they're operating at a loss.
Yeah, I do think they are, and I think that it's not helping that they get their revenue based on the number of students, and they don't seem to be adding a lot of students. So there's probably kind of an imbalance there where they're adding new locations but not enough new students to offset that.
All right, Alex, what do you think of the performance of our applicants in that past 30 seconds?
So I think Brad, again, was super confident in his ideas, but he didn't do a really good job of letting his other teammates speak, and he also interrupted his teammates a couple of times when they were trying to present their ideas. And I think Alex did a good job of noticing that the nonprofit was operating at a pretty big loss, and that corresponded with a decrease in revenue due to, or a slower growth in revenue due to a slower growth in number of students and an increase in costs because of the new locations.
Right, so I think that by looking at the financial data with a little bit more detail, we can see that our personnel expenses have exceeded the number of students served in proportion of increase from 2015 to 2019. Maybe if we decrease the number of locations, or at the very least the spread of locations, we can kind of optimize our personnel pay so that we can serve more students for quite a bit less paying the personnel.
I totally agree. I think that looking at the map, we can see that in 2018, 2019, all of their locations kind of were in the north side. So they started out in the south side and started expanding further north. So we could maybe even consider cutting some of these
Cutting
new
some of the
locations.
new locations.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense given what you just said.
Guys, wait. We can just increase private donations from $6,000 in 2019 to about $2,000 in 2020, and we'll almost break even.
I think that there could be some room to increase private donations, but also looking at the current financials, private donations make up such a small part that it might not be possible to increase them super substantially within a year. But I think the idea of decreasing costs by cutting new locations might be a really good area to pursue and think more about.
Yeah, I really agree. So it seems like we're going to have to figure out which one or two sites maybe we should be cutting so that we could decrease our expenses and help more students.
Yeah, I mean, even just looking at the 2018 to 2019 change in program data, it seems that even though they added 2 new locations, they only added 10 more students, which is a lot less than 2017 to 2018 when they added 30 students without even adding new locations. So I definitely agree that some of the new locations that were added probably not super necessary.
Yeah, and I'm seeing specifically a lot of positive reviews about the Kenwood site, the South Lawndale, and the Woodlawn site, whereas it seems that there's a specific review saying that the Logan Square site is struggling with some of their operations.
Yeah, and it seems like they're even saying that they're taking students from existing other locations like the Westtown one. So I think it might be a good idea to shut down some of the north side ones that are just cannibalizing students from other places.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Specifically, perhaps we should look at the Albany Park and the Logan Square sites, which have been added in 2018 to 2019.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we could probably even figure out what specific, what our financials would look like if we caught these 2 locations. I'm not really sure what personnel costs include. Do you have any information on what kind of personnel are hired and what their salaries are?
Good question. We have 2 types of personnel. Each site is required to have one site administrator who's responsible for certain legal responsibilities, taking care of the kids. We're required to by law to have one of those per site. And then we also have tutors who are the ones that are actually teaching the kids and taking care of them. And we can have as many of those as we want. And obviously, the better our student-teacher ratio is, the better the quality of our services. And each of these employees gets paid $10,000 a year.
Interesting. So if we look at the data on the tutors and the site admins, it seems that we need 1 site admin per site, whereas we need one tutor per 10 people. So if we can find a way to optimize that kind of ratio there so that we can serve the most students, perhaps fewer locations could be the way to go.
All right. What did you think of our candidates' performance in those last few minutes?
It seems that our candidates have been doing a lot better over the past couple of clips. Specifically in this last one, we saw a lot of integrating data between different data sources, which is a key component of succeeding in this case. Also, we saw some great energy from Alex and Chad, working together well to come to conclusions using both of the different data sources. Brad seemed to be a little bit quieter, but he was still being included by the other 2 team members, and they used that to make some good conclusions about what final solution to come to.
Okay, so Since the second question that we had to answer was what our funding would look like if we didn't change anything, we know that we're going to have $500 less per student in 2020, and if our number of students don't change and they stay at 190, then that would be an additional $95,000 loss. And since we're already operating at a $3,000 loss this year, the financials for next year, if we don't do anything to change that, would just be a $98,000 loss.
Right, so if we look at what we talked about earlier, closing those two most northern locations, it seems that that would save us about $30,000, leaving us still at a deficit of $68,000. So maybe we look to the tutor data here. It looks like we're paying about $10,000 per tutor. So if we're able to get maybe volunteer tutors or at the very least part-time tutors to solve this issue, we could end up saving about maybe $70,000 or even more by reducing our number of tutors by 7.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that if we have people volunteer and we possibly switch in some volunteer tutors at locations that are already doing super well and have a lot of students so that there's not as much of an impact, that could really help out the organization.
Sure.
All right, applicants, good work in your preparation there. Now, imagine your client has come in, you've been working on this project for 10 weeks, and it's time to present your findings and recommendations. Go.
All right, Chief. So this is what I came up with the help of these two over here. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna cut down on our two northernmost, most recently added locations, and this is gonna save us a total of $30,000 right off the top. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna convert 7 of our tutors into volunteers, so we're gonna stop paying them. That's gonna save us another 70 grand. That's $100,000 that we're going to save. Now, if we don't do these two changes, we're gonna be $98,000 in the red. And so by cutting down on our number of tutors and closing these two stations, what we're gonna do is we're going to end up $2,000 surplus, $2,000 of profit. And that's our plan.
Any input from the rest of the team?
Looks like that's everything.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming in. This has been the conclusion of your interview. Have a good day. We'll get back to you soon. Adrian, what do you think of the final presentation given by the applicants?
Yeah, so Brad did a great job of stating the key pieces of information right at the beginning. However, it should be good practice for everyone in the team to speak during the final presentation. And so Brad should have done a better job of letting the other 2 members in the group have a chance to split part of that presentation.
So in sum, I think our applicants did a pretty good job of solving this case. Honestly, we saw them bust out their analytical skills, we saw them use some good teamwork. I was really impressed by their ability to draw information from multiple different data sources and pull that into conclusive, solid recommendations. They made sure to specifically answer the questions in the prompt when they gave their final recommendations. There were some rough spots in terms of communication. Some team members participated more than others. Some team members could be a little interpersonally aggressive at times. But I think overall, the analysis was solid and the case went pretty well. If you want to see what we think the most important insights in the case were, we've posted the case with our complete guide to the solution online, but it's important to keep in mind that no solution is ever perfect because there's always a lot of room for creativity. So for example, our applicants came up with the idea to replace some of their paid tutor labor with volunteer labor. That is just one of many creative solutions that we've seen as applicants try to answer this case, and we love it when people come up with good solutions that we've never heard before.
Also, yeah.
Great job, guys.
Great to see you.
Yeah. Did I get in?
We'll let you know in like a week.
Okay.
No.
You mind if I hang out here?
We actually have some more interviewees coming in, so I'm gonna need you to, yeah. Have you had your behavioral yet? Good
Yeah.
luck with that.